Is it time for term limits? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, happy Thursday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you live from our Stratus IP studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. Don't let cyber attacks or outdated business technology put your company at risk. Learn more at briannicholsshow.com/Stratus IP. So, let's dig into the topic of conversation today, which just happens to be a topic that is one passion project of a certain member who is running for Congress, and that is one Michael Corbin, who is joining us here on The Brian Nichols Show. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate you having me and your enthusiasm. But yeah, term limits are something that are near and dear to me. I think to a lot of Americans. I think, it's a problem, a systemic problem that needs to be solved. Will it ever be solved? It's going to be tough to get it passed because you're asking people to essentially fire or themselves or limit themselves. But it's an issue. And the more attention and awareness we can raise, the better.
Absolutely. Well, here, let's dig more into that topic. But first, before we get there, do us a favor. Introduce yourself to the Brian Nichols Show audience and why you're running for Congress down in Georgia 7th.
Yeah, so I ran in 2022, narrowly lost in a primary runoff, which, in the state of Georgia, we've become notorious for runoffs. That's another passion that I have right now, working towards trying to get legislation passed to end runoffs, or at least eliminate the 50+1 rule now to ensure that a runoff doesn't happen. But running in my district, a district that is near and dear to me, I've lived in for over 20 some odd years here in the state of Georgia. It's a district that is one that after redistricting in 2022 became more challenging for the Republicans. So it is leaning more towards the Democrat side. And at this time, we did lose in the general election in 2022, unfortunately by a larger margin than we should have. And one of the major reasons was the candidate that we put out there, which is another passion of mine in terms of, are we putting the right candidates out in the right districts to be the most competitive and the most strategic, or are we just trying to put the best candidate out there that placates the people of DC or the farthest right wing people out there?
Yep. Well, you heard it here in the intro. What do we focus here on the Brian Nichols Show? Meeting people where they're at on the issues they care about. That's what wins, right? So I know term limits wins, and you're obviously bringing this to the forefront of a major issue that a lot of folks are trying to see, hey, is this something we can actually get into action? So do you see the term limits as a viable means to actually get into play sometime here in the near future?
What I would see is legislation being passed is, I'm not going to say it's impossible. It's tough, right? Because you're asking people right now, most of the people I would say in Congress or, in the Senate are not in favor of it, right? Because they don't want to term limit themselves. They see it as a way to position themselves as a career politician. Now, what the public needs to understand is you need to vote for and really pick out those candidates that are running that really despise term limits, and that at the core fundamental know that it is destroying our country, because we have career politicians that come in, as, regular citizens and leave as, multimillionaires. And that has to stop. There's too many interests that are tied together that don't match up with the constituencies that they actually represent. So it's got to start with awareness within the public that you need to go after candidates that don't see this as I'm going to be here for 20 years. They see this as, I'm going to be here for 6, 8 years. And that's max. And I'm out. I've done my service. I've done what I needed to do for my country. And that's how I see this role. So the more that people understand that and vote for those type of people, organically, you're going to start to have more of that makeup in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And it'll be more likely that people are not overrunning their terms. It passing a legislation, probably a good 20 years out, if not more, because that organic process is going to have to take place first.
Yep, understood. Well, thank you for leading the fight, right? I think we need more folks in Congress, or at least folks running for Congress, to raise this up as an issue. So encourage your Congress folk to get out there and actually have this conversation about term limits. And let's talk about some other stuff I know you're raising up on the trail, and that is one of immigration, but also of border security and all the unintended consequences thereafter. Talk to us about that and what the Georgian voters are saying in response to your argument as you bring that to the table.
Yeah, the immigration has become a huge problem, right? Our borders are flooded. To me, the biggest thing is national security. As we're already seeing, I think in the past 2 months, it was somewhere around 900 Chinese immigrants that are coming across, foreign nationals, that we don't know what their business is that, they're trying to accomplish over here. And we already know how those relations are going with China as it stands right now. So terrorists, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all of those things are what most people worry about. And they're just coming in, right? There's no vetting process. We're not supporting the border agents at the border. We just need to go back to what worked, and that was the remain in Mexico policy. We have to stop the bleeding, and we have to put a process in place that was already there, that was working, to limit this. There's chaos, and people like to create chaos because chaos creates the ability to, manipulate the politics of elections, and that's what the Democrats are doing. So it's really just them turning a blind eye to immigration, not really caring about it. It's sad, honestly, because there's a lot of immigrants that are coming across that are, human beings that are being treated, like animals, being shipped off to different cities and becoming really just a political pawn for the Democrats for the most part.
It's like when you see the pharmaceutical company who they create the heart drug that causes heart attacks, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Another thing that doesn't make sense is our company. You can tell I've been in a sales role today. In our geez, you got me now. Country. There we go. Country's infrastructure. Get that right, Brian. And we see this right now with what just happened up in Ohio, right? In New Palestine, where we had this trail derailment, and with the train derailing, we have all this toxic fumes being pumped into the environment, and now we have ginormous question marks for the long-term unintended consequences, implications there. So obviously this is something that's a big red flag. Our country's infrastructure is crumbling, and this is a main result of this. And we see train derailments now, it seems, across the country on a daily occurrence. So what would you say is the response when it comes to dealing with our crumbling infrastructure?
We do have to invest in it. That is something that has to take place. We also have to hold people accountable, when these accidents do happen, and we have to provide transparency. And that's not what's happening right now in Ohio, in East Palestine. It's sad. I'm lived in Georgia since, early 90s, 1992. But I actually grew up in Ohio, not too far from where that train derailment took place. But it's going to devastate that community. I don't know if people are going to be able to live there anymore. If I lived there, I'd want to sell my house and get out of there. I don't want my kids drinking that water. I don't want them to be exposed to the air. There's just a myriad of things that can happen. But, just like so many things that have happened within the Biden administration, there is no, credible reaction or transparency to how we're actually going to solve this problem. Are we investing in infrastructure? I know Biden touted that, in a major way in his fairy tale State of the Union speech, but it's one of those things where it's been ignored. But also we have to look at the private sector and those that run the railways and make sure that they're following the proper safety procedures. In this instance, I think it's still too early to tell, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to dive into that. But, I think there are also some safety precautions that could have taken place with that specific train that weren't. It leads to these sort of things. But you and I was actually talking about this with my wife, over the summer. There's, through Norcross, Georgia, there, trains, run down through there. There's a park, and we were walking along the train tracks, and we were just both looking at each other in just amazement that, these massive trains, tons and tons of material actually can still ride on these railways. I mean, they're so old looking, and you look at some of the other European countries and Asian countries and their railways, night and day. So it's been avoided for way too long. It carries too much of our supplies throughout our country that we rely on. And when something like this happens, it just, adds fuel to the fire. Right. So, and no pun intended there. No pun intended. It is a horrible, horrible incident that happened there. And like I said, I don't know if that city's ever going to recover and be the same.
Yeah. Well, I saw a video on Twitter and it showed a train going through. What do trains do? The trains drive? I don't know. It was navigating.
They move.
Yeah, they just locomote. They are locomotives, so I guess they do that. But they were going from Ohio to Pennsylvania or vice versa, and the train track, it looks like, oh man, it looks like somebody just took a line, and it's probably me drawing a line, just like down, and it was so wavy. And it's like, this is what's transporting our infrastructure across the country, and this is our very toxic stuff that's going across this, and it's supposed to be considered safe. What? It's a big red flag, and I guess this also goes to another big red flag that a lot of us are seeing right now, and that is what's happening with the war over in Ukraine. And you saw with the Nord Stream pipeline being just inexplicably blown up. That just happened. But also, look at the United States now raising questions and concerns about energy independence. So what's the solution there for Americans? Do we have a solution for energy independence?
Not under the current administration, no. It's going to take a complete overhaul, and hopefully that happens in 2024. I think it will. But there is no path right now. I mean, everything is going towards renewables, and I think as we look towards the future, that's great. But if you don't have the infrastructure in place to support the renewables, and you don't have products and services that are affordable to the everyday American citizen, it doesn't work, right? So there's been a lot of lies in covering up what's going on in the oil industry, a lot of finger pointing to the oil and gas companies of taking advantage of the situation with the consumers and the gas prices. And I don't believe that. I don't buy that. It's all related to the Biden policies day one, with shutting down the Keystone pipeline, with his posture towards the fossil fuel industry, and it's put them on edge. So I don't think they're doing it to hurt the American citizens. They're in protect mode, right? And they don't know what's coming from the Biden administration.
Alrighty, I want to talk about education, because you talk about the future of America, it starts with our kids. And we see this right now. A lot of parents over the past 3 years really woke up in terms of what their kids were learning behind the scenes, because it was now right there, dead center in the kitchen. They got to see it on their kids' laptops when they were bringing all their schooling right home. And a lot of the parents said, wait, this is what you're being taught in school? And it wasn't really stuff that they should be being taught in school, or just being taught in general because they're kids. So this led to a big revolt from the parental movement across the country. And I guess, we look where we are in 2023. Our good buddy Corey DeAngelis, he's going across making waves in the school choice movement. What are your thoughts? Do you think school choice is the right way, or should we try to salvage what we can with our old public education system?
I think school choice is the way forward. How quickly that happens, I don't know. It's going to be a state by state sort of domino effect. And, I was actually at an event where he was speaking. I work with Jake Evans. He ran in the Georgia 6 just this past election cycle. And I'm part of his group, Trailblazer Rising. And we are for that, school education and school choice. We have to be able to put pressure back on the public school system. And if there's not a credible threat that, our taxpayers' dollars can follow our children to a school that's going to be better suited for them, then they're just going to build brick and mortar schools and teach what they want to teach. And the standards will continue to go down and down. So if you don't apply that outside pressure, they're not going to be held accountable. And we're just going to see more of the same.
All right, Michael. So with that being said, we are going towards the tail end of the episode, and we like to do that with a little thing we call final thoughts. And I'll kick things off, right? And I think you're speaking to more of what we need to see in the GOP, right? that is someone who's willing to not only stand up and fight the good fight, but continue to fight the good fight, even when you've gotten kicked and knocked down, right? And I think it's more imperative for us as a liberty movement, shall we say, to support people who not only are leading by example, but also let's go ahead and support them by helping with fundraising dollars, helping by volunteering or donating your time, but also by supporting them at Election Day. That's the most important thing. When you look at voter turnout, it's abysmal. And I think it's on us to get people to actually go out and vote, right? And we can have a debate about, does it work? Is it worth our time? It is worth our time. It's not a debate in my end. You need to go out and make the change if you want to see things get better. So that's my final thoughts for today. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, I would say that, in the state of Georgia as well, and I know we talked earlier on the show, we got to get rid of runoffs. I would say the turnout was okay for a midterm election in my last cycle. My race was unusual. Let's just say that. So I won 41.2% of the vote out of 45,000 that came out and had to go to a runoff still. The next leading candidate was around like 24%. And he beat me in the runoff because the runoffs had a 74% drop off. And I was pretty much smoked out by the local GOP. But being the candidate of choice actually for the constituency at large, was kind of run off. So I'm back because people, voted for me, wanted my message. But unfortunately, because of the runoff system, the lack thereof about the education of it and just, awareness, which is all on the candidates to bring that awareness, led to obviously me not being the nominee. So I'm looking forward to going back, this time being the nominee, and putting it to Lucy McBath and taking back the 7th district.
All right, folks. So there is your call to action today. If you're down in Georgia 7th district, please go ahead, check out Michael and his campaign. And of course, Michael, we want folks to go ahead and continue the conversation. So where can they go ahead, find you? And also, where can they go ahead and support your campaign?
Yeah, you can go on to my website, which is Corbin, the number 4 Congress. So a lot of information there. Twitter handle is @Corbin for Congress. That's the best place to go to catch me on social media. So those are the 2 best places.
Alrighty, well, we'll make sure we include all those links down there in the show notes. And by the way, folks, if you're joining us here on the podcast version of the show, which I know 99% of you are, well, you're missing out on so much, including our video content of the show, which is available on YouTube, but also on Rumble and on Odyssey, wherever it is you consume your video content. Just do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and little notification bell so you don't miss a single time we go live. And for example, yesterday I sat down and I told libertarians, because we have a lot of libertarians here in our audience, how to actually sell to conservatives. If you want to go ahead and learn how I said we could do that, and also how it's actually a lot easier than you think it might be, go ahead and check out yesterday's episode. That link will show up right here. Otherwise, you can go ahead and check us out over at briannicholsshow.com, find the entire transcript of today's episode, plus you can find all of Michael's links and all 684 other episodes of the program. But with that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Michael Corbin. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.